All right. So we're live, kind of, sort of, on a delay. Thanks for joining me, friends, foes, haters, subscribers, co op agents, potential clients, past clients. Thanks, everybody, for watching this. Got a question from a buyer yesterday. They're buying a home out of state. I'm kind of sort of helping them in sort of an advisor role a little bit. Not their agent. I always defer to their agent in matters that require an agent to be there. But the question was asked to me. They're like, I'm looking at this property. I want to buy this property. I've seen it. I like it. I want to make the deal happen, but the seller is just asking way too much money. What do I do? I've looked at the other homes in the neighborhood. He's buying a duplex. So I've looked at the other homes in the area. I can't make the numbers make sense. I really want to buy this property, but the other homes in the area don't really reflect the price that my seller is asking for this property. What do I do? Okay. So, and maybe this will happen to you someday. Okay, or maybe you'll have a client that this will happen to if you're a real estate agent. You've got a property, you want to buy it, but the price just doesn't make sense. But you want to buy it. Okay. So he made an offer. The seller said no. He said the only way the seller would accept was if he got his price. So here's what I told him to do, or here's what I suggested I would do if I was in his situation. And I'll tell this to you. So when you're buying a home, if you're getting a loan, if you're getting financing, you're probably going to have an appraisal. So put the appraisal in your contract as something that you get to do, something that you have the right to do if you're the buyer, and something that you can cancel for if the appraisal comes in low. Okay. So let's say property is going to be, you think the property's worth $400,000, but the seller's asking $450,000 for it. In your offer, make sure you put that you're going to have an appraisal and that you have the right to cancel if the appraisal comes in below the $450,000 contract price that you've offered. Okay? The appraisal, which is going to be done by a third party, they don't have a dog in the fight. They're not going to care what you think the property's worth, and they're not going to care what the seller thinks the property's worth. They're going to do their own independent assessment. They're going to write a report known as an appraisal. They're going to give the appraisal to your lender if you're the buyer, and then from your lender, you can get the appraisal. And then and only then can you really get that unbiased third-party perspective and use it in your negotiation. So if we're under contract and we're like, well, we want to find out what the appraisal comes back at. We want to know if it's going to come back at 450 or 400. I think it may be coming back at 400. You should want to figure that out sooner rather than later. I actually told the person that what I would do is I'd go ahead and order that on day one, get the appraisal going, and try to get the results back as quickly as possible. So you get your bad news as soon as you can get it. And if the appraisal comes back that the property is only worth $400,000 and the seller wants $450,000, you can present the seller with, hey, here's my appraisal, and I'm not saying it's worth $400,000. I got this appraiser right here saying it's worth $400,000. So there you go, and slap it down on the seller's desk and say, I told you so. It's worth $400,000, and try to negotiate off of what the appraiser said. And you could even say, if it's like, for example, if it's an FHA loan, you might tell the seller, hey, this FHA appraisal that I had, it sticks with the property. So if anybody else around town's trying to get this property with an FHA loan, it ain't gonna fly. You have to use this FHA loan that's on file. Now, of course, the seller may ask you, well, I still want $450,000. I know that it appraised at $400,000, but I still want $450,000. To which you could reply, listen, buddy, no one's going to come out of pocket an extra $50,000 just to buy this property. It's not that special. So I recommend you get real or just take the property off the market because you don't want to sell it. But I'm a real buyer. I'm really interested. I'm already pre-approved. I want to close. I'm going to close in 3 weeks. But we got to sell it at a fair market value, and this is what the fair market value is. That's what I would do. That's how I would handle it. And I shared that with that buyer. Now, the timing is important on that. I don't recommend doing inspections until you've already got the appraisal done if you know the appraisal is going to be a problem. Because when you do inspections, it's going to cost you money if you're the buyer. And that money is non-refundable. You're paying an inspector. They're going to come out and look at the property, give you a report. They're going to tell you what's wrong with the property. And they're jumping in their truck and leaving. And you're going to be stuck reading a report, thinking about, what needs fixed and how much money off the price of the home you can get. And you're going to be in a position where you have to negotiate with the seller on these repair items, and it may not even matter because the elephant in the room is, well, if the property comes back at a $400,000 appraised value and the seller doesn't want to play ball because he still wants $450,000, all this negotiating I'm doing, all this money I'm spending on inspectors, it's worthless. I've wasted my time. I've wasted my money. If you do the appraisal first, sure, you might spend $500 on an appraisal. A lot of times the seller won't collect that money up. A lot of times your lender will not collect that money up front. They're expecting to be paid at closing. So a lot of times if you don't end up buying the property, the appraiser doesn't cost you anything. The appraisal doesn't cost you anything as a borrower. Sometimes, in other words, you can order the appraisal, the lender will pay for it, and if you don't buy the property, then the lender just eats that fee. Okay, so let's say you had the appraisal done. A lot of times there's no money out of pocket. If the appraisal results are bad and you can't strike a deal with the seller, you can't come to terms on what the new price is, you're out the door. You're gone. You didn't spend money on inspections. You didn't spend the time on inspections. You're off to the next property. If you can strike a deal with the seller after the appraisal comes in low, let's say you got the appraisal came back at 400 and you got the seller to come down from 450 down to 400, which is where you thought the property needed to be all along. But you were right and you planned and you played it cool. You gave him the 450 up front. The seller bit. The appraisal came in low a week later. You got him down to 400,000. Now you can do your inspections. So when you come to the seller and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, it's not getting muddied up with what happened at the appraisal. You don't want the appraisal and the inspections happening at the same time, because then the seller doesn't look at everything in the proper context. He may look at everything and say, you know what? If I'm coming down $50,000, you have to take it as is. Or if I'm coming down $50,000, that's it. So when you separate the two out and you go, okay, that was then, and now I'm going to do my inspections. Now you have more leverage on the seller to be like, fix this, and we're done. And obviously, if he says no, then he's going to have not only a low appraisal stuck with the property, but he's also going to have an inspection report that he's going to have to disclose to future buyers of all the problems that are wrong with the property. So you continue to have the leverage, right? The opposite, if you do that in the wrong order, if you do it in the wrong order and you do your inspections first, you could you could do your inspections and there could be repairs, and you could say, you know what, I want $10,000 off the price of the house. And the seller's like, okay, so he gives you $10,000 because let's say the furnace and air conditioner are bad or something like that. So now the property went from $450 to $440. Then the appraisal comes in at $400,000. So then you guys agree to a $400,000 sales price. You've lost what you've negotiated because of your inspections. You lost it because the seller's not going to probably want to sell it to you for $390,000. They're not going to give you that extra $10,000 grace that they give you because they just got punched in the face with a low appraisal, and they're not feeling charitable right now. So you're going to lose if you do it the opposite way. So if you think you're going to have an appraisal issue, I would say it's a good idea to come at it from this way in your negotiations. And you'll need to make sure your offer's written to give you enough time to get through your appraisal, through your appraisal renegotiation, and also do inspections. You don't want to run out of time where you have to do inspections when your appraisal period is still going. You want to give yourself and work with your real estate agent so you've got enough time. It's all spaced out in your offer so you can order the appraisal right away, get the answer on that, and then you can work it out with the seller. And then once it's worked out, you can still have plenty of time to do your inspections and then bring that to the seller. And if you do it that way, then you're going to end up with a stronger position from which to negotiate. You're going to be able to negotiate a better price and better repairs. And, most importantly, you're going to actually have a better chance of closing on the property you wanted all along. See, what you don't want to do is sit on the sidelines and say, this guy's being unrealistic. I want the property. The guy's not being realistic, so I'm just going to pass on it. That's what everybody else does. That's what all the other buyers do. They sit on the sidelines and scratch their head and point and go, that guy's off his rocker. So you can be the person now with a game plan going into the market, going and making an offer. Maybe, where this is oftentimes found is properties that are amazing properties, but they're overpriced, sitting on the market for a long time, maybe on the market a couple hundred days. The seller, he's just so hard-headed, he won't accept lower offers. He's been lowballed. He's been given lowball offers or lower offers in the past. He's rejected them. All you have to do is come in and do what we just talked about, and a lot of times it's going to work. Now, I'm also speaking from the standpoint of I know the mentality of a seller. A seller, because I represent a lot of sellers, I represent a lot of buyers. For sellers, a lot of times, they're willing to acquiesce. They're willing to give up ground in the negotiation if they know the deal is almost over. So when you come to the seller and you're asking for something, like let's say you wanted $50,000 off the price because of a low appraisal, they're more willing to give it to you if they know, well, you've already turned your earnest money deposit in, you're already good for the loan, you've already got your inspection scheduled, you close in 3 weeks. They're more willing to wrap their head around that and say, okay, and kind of justify to themselves, okay, well, that's fine. Let's go ahead and just get it done. A lot of times the sellers are already packing. They may have already made an offer on another home. They may have already put a deposit down on an apartment. They're already in progress. They're vulnerable. They may be vulnerable and more willing to strike a deal than they were before they accepted your offer. Once they accepted your offer, they might be like, hell, we got to move. We got to get the hell out of Dodge. Before, they're like, no, I'm not packing anything until I get my price, right? So if the seller is one of those people, and there are a lot of those sellers out there, just keep that in mind, okay? That's a negotiating tip from your old pal Edward Stevens over here at the Stevens Group at Reese Nichols. Hit me up. I want to know what your negotiating problems are in real estate, I'd be super interested to know. You can drop them in my DMs. You can send them to the comments section here. And if I get any, and when I get some, I'm going to answer them. Edward Stevens with the Stevens Group at Reese Nichols. Look forward to seeing you one day at the closing table.